also talk about other places besides Alaska, but mostly it's Alaska themed.
Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. Running into Sean here with you. And well, Sean, it's good to see your face, man. How's it going?
Pretty good. Feeling the winter blues a little bit, but
Talk to me a little bit about that. Talk to me about the winter blues.
Well, I just went and visited you in Atlanta for Thanksgiving, and I was pretty sick. And then I came back here, and I was like, "Oh, okay." It's pretty dark these days, you know. It's like I was outside today at like 12:30, like the heat of the day, and it was just like the sun was. It looked like it was about to get dark, and I was like, "It's 12 o'clock. Like this is the one time that the sun should be almost maybe around." But yeah, you know, and there can be personal reasons of just, but the accumulative. I don't know. There's more variables at play than just the darkness and the cold, but just wake up, go to work. It's dark. Get outside for an hour, maybe sometime during the day for lunch, and then driving back. It's dark. It's just it's just a little bit of a bummer. And I mean, it's like the reality is though. It's like it's kind of like that in Washington and Oregon. It's like that even in Atlanta, dude. It's like,
dude, absolutely,
it's dark at 5.
It's like, I was gonna say like
a little more extreme for me, but it's not like everybody's kind of going through it, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, we pick up. We have my wife and I have a 3-year-old almost, and we pick him up from daycare. And if he doesn't get outside immediately when he gets home, it's like come 5:15, 5:30, it's dark. And, it's the same thing, especially, like for anyone, this is the time of the year, like back when I had a more regular 9 to 5 kind of job. This was a tough time of the year because like you'd get up early, fight traffic, it'd be dark, right? Same thing you're describing there. And then like maybe you get out for lunch or whatever, and then you drive back, and by the time you get home, it's already dark again. And you're like, ugh. And it'll be like only 7 o'clock, but it's dark and you want to like just immediately go to sleep essentially. So I feel you, dude. But I have to say, man, it was good to see you. And Sean, he was here like 2 months ago. And that was awesome. We talked about like Sean and I went to a concert in Seattle, and then we came back here to Atlanta together. But our grandmother just turned 100 on Thanksgiving. And so it's like Sean had to be back for that. We had some other family in town, and that was really fun, man. And we did our best. This was our first year on Thanksgiving where it was our generation that like essentially pulled off the entire meal. So, my mom, who is the caregiver of my grandmother, was able to, our mom, I should say, she was able to kind of like just host it and not have to worry about executing it and be able to enjoy her mom's 100th birthday too. So, shout out to you for being there. And I know you were back like twice so quickly, but we loved having you. That's for sure.
Yeah, I loved being down there, and it was fun. It's always special to just be with your family on the holidays, and even if don't get to, like at first I don't get to that much, so that was kind of cool. Like, yeah, I don't get to do that too often these days. Like for Christmas, I'll be with the Alaskan family hopefully, but yeah, it was meaningful for me, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It was 70 degrees and sunny most of the time I was there. So
let's go. I was playing disc golf almost every day that you were there.
Yeah, I was banging chains, as they say.
Hey, I like it. But anyways, so this episode we have an interview with Calvin Daugherty, and we really, really had a good time talking with him. The funny thing about it is we actually interviewed him right before Thanksgiving. We did an intro before Thanksgiving. And then the madness of that week of Sean being here, of my grandmother's birthday, of it being Thanksgiving. Excuses. I'll take full blame for it. But it's like with the news of the Iditarod and some new additions at the deadline here. It's like, well, why don't we just re-record this? And so, well, I'll just say, brother, can you hear it? We are 86 days away from the Iditarod. And so these signups that just happened were, the deadline before the entry fee goes up. So we got 5. And damn it, I'm happy. I'm glad. I'm glad that number's up to 35. We started out with 27 at the summer signups. So been able to add 8 more mushers, and I'm a fan of all these people that are back in it. So I figure we can kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, 86 days, of course, if you think 86 days, so the Iditarod, which is the penultimate, maybe there's 2 events after Iditarod, the T200, T-Dog 200, and the Kobuk. There's 3 or 4 or 5 events before it. And so it's going to be, pretty exciting, really, starting in the new year with the Connect 200 and some of the smaller events in there. And of course, we've got Copper Basin and Cusco, followed by the Yukon Quest, which has an Alaska and a Canada event and multiple ones of each. So there's just like a real busy time coming up. And then for mushers right now, they're scrambling, getting those big mileage trips in. That kind of window started in November and maybe continue for some people all the way through January and early February. But you see a lot of people doing these Denali Highway trips, camping trips in the White Mountains up near Fairbanks, going out in the Kenai Peninsula over there at Ski Lac Lake. You see people training dogs. So, yeah, pretty exciting time for mushers getting ready for these events and to go and explore this amazing state with their dog teams, well supported. And so, we had some new signups. I think probably the lowest hanging fruit would be Mitch Seavey signing up. People have been throwing retirement and his name in the same sentence now for a couple of years. Even literally, like Calvin, I feel like might have even like alluded to, since Mitch is retired, like during the episode we're about to air. So yeah, I think
a lot can change in like 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, so like maybe like Calvin didn't even know, who's working with Mitch in some capacity. So yeah, I would think if I was a betting man, he's not going to enter the race without some serious intentions, given his success, and then of course we have Mr. Failer signing up, which I had a personal conversation with him where he said, this is just like kind of like the most common thing you'll hear in mushing, and we've probably alluded to it many times when people say, I think I'm going to take next year off, and he said that to me. He's like, I got the kid and da-da-da. But it's like, you got yourself a badass team of dogs that are like in their prime, and it's this like group of dogs will only ever be in their prime once. And it could be like, he cracked the top 10 with them. He's had a couple good years. Then maybe there's a lot of rookies in this year's race. There's probably, being in the top 10 is pretty realistic for him. Maybe even certainly easy for him to dream about top 5. So yeah, really excited on the competitive side of things to see those 2 guys in it. There's some other names too, Brendan.
Yeah, well, I wanted to just really quickly say the article I read about Matt Failer, it said that he had just done an evening with Matt Failer. It was some sort of an event hosted by Richland Source. And it was just recently that he did this, and where he was like, there's a quote in there. It's like, I'm pretty sure we're sitting out, but it's not set in stone. I've done 13 now. So that's me reading the quote. And so, it's just kind of interesting that the itch was there. And, like you said, man, he's got those dogs. They're in their prime. And, reading this article, it reminded me like he was having a really good run last year, and he was running behind Hunter and came up along Hunter as he was dealing with his situation, and he essentially kind of took himself out of like race mode and was kind of being like a caretaker to Hunter and like getting him through that process. And so just like it's great to hear that he's back, and hopefully he can build on a great race that he had last year. And you had his sportsmanship award as well, so it'll be nice to see him in the Sears race for sure.
Yeah, man. He also, I believe, Dane Baker's coming out of 17th dog too. So that's like, I've been to their kennel. It's not like the biggest. It's definitely not like Mitch's, Dallas's, some of these guys that have 80 plus or 100 plus dogs. Like they're not quite there with how many dogs they have. So I'm interested to see, maybe we'll get a chance to talk to Dane. I'm certainly I'll be able to talk to him at the race start. And, but yeah, I'm just kind of curious, what Dane's working with, if he's got like a kind of a young group or, maybe a couple of savvy veterans in there too, but I'm sure, they're going to just kind of have the A team for Failer, and there's going to be a couple, there's probably 20 dogs that he can pick from. Then the 4 that he doesn't pick will be on Dane's, and then probably there's some 2-year-olds. It would be my guess, but we'll find out. And yeah, obviously like some really great dogs on those teams, and of course Mitch, that goes without being said.
And then the others were Bryce Mumford. He's returning for another returning rookie. Yeah. I would love to talk to him. I think last year was an experience. I know he had that like heck a long run into Unilaclete where he was kind of asked to scratch, or whatever the situation was, that's where he scratched. And I love that he wasn't discouraged and is coming back and is going to get another opportunity to earn the belt and go into the arches. So, there's Bryce, and then Bailey Vitello is returning for his third Iditarod in a row. And then you have Quince Mountain, and he
ran in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah. So, firstly, we go with Bryce. I think he learned a lot coming this last year. I think he's going to be approaching it differently this year. And I'm excited to see, the changes in his race plan, and maybe hear about the changes in how he trains. So I'm looking forward to seeing him out on the trail. Of course, he's always been a very confident dude. I met him before he ran on Iditarod. He's got a lot of confidence, but now he's got a lot of experience backing up that confidence. And I think that I think that confidence goes a long way across any facet of life. And even if it's like not based on like a ton of experience, and he went out there and he has crushed his 2 Iditarods, and now he's got, these a pretty strong dog team. He knows what he's doing. I think you're going to see his results continue to improve. And then go ahead.
That's what I was just about to say, not to cut you off there, but so he went from 24th to 17th place from 23 to 24, and within that, he also shaved a day and some change off. So he went from 11 days and 16 hours to 10 days and 10 hours. So he's definitely, I think he's probably got to be thinking about top 10. I mean, 3rd in a row, smaller field, not a lot of the big names.
There is something to be said for
a lot of confidence.
This year was the northern route, which is definitely the faster route. So it's not like a linear information there, but yes.
Okay. I stand corrected. Right. Thank you.
But no, you're not correct.
That's why you're here.
Noting.
Thank you.
It's just worth noting. But But yeah, I do think he'll be improving.
Yeah. So he's an exciting one. And then Quince gets a chance to return.
I got to share the trail a little bit with him, and we trained in the same places. His wife, I can't remember her name, but she ran that Iditarod and finished, and has a book, Welcome to the Goddamn Icebox or something. She's a great writer, and so I was wondering. He got to the coast, and he was, I guess, kind of far behind, and had to end his race, and then I was surprised to not see him back the next year or the year after that. And he's always been in the back of my head. Like, I wonder, like, what's going on there. So I haven't been following them closely. I don't know if they've been like publicly sharing what they're doing with their dogs or whatever, but I'm just kind of excited to see his name back out there.
Totally.
And returning into the event, and wish him the best, and hopefully they can get Quince that belt buckle. So cool to see some of these returning rookies like Bryson, Quince, coming back.
Absolutely.
Give it another go.
Yep. And then, so the other thing I was going to ask you about, so as I was kind of like looking through some things, I guess somehow I overlooked this and wanted to kind of get your view on things related to this. So I was clicking around on that Iditarod's website. It says Joshua Robinson sanctioned by disqualification from the Iditarod in 24. So reading it, the Iditarod announced, due to violation of Rule 39, that Josh Robinson's 27th place finish during the Iditarod.
Robinson or Robbins?
Robbins. Sorry. If I said Robinson, that's on me.
That's what I heard, but go ahead.
Okay. Joshua Robbins. Rule 39 states no oral or topical drug may suppress the signs of illness or injury, may be used on a dog. No injectable may be used on the dog. No other drugs or artificial means may be used to drive a dog or cause a dog to perform or attempt to perform beyond its natural ability. As per disqualification, Robbins will be required to return his prize money, and he will be a rookie should he decide to run again. Blah, 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 blah. Applications will be, should he choose to run in the future Iditarods, they will accept it and welcome it. So I was just like kind of surprised by that. September 11th is when that came out. That's like a full, 6 months later. I don't know. Just what your thoughts? Is that your first time hearing this?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I would say my first thought is, what was it specifically? Rule 39 is kind of a vague,
right?
Yeah. So he gave the dogs some kind of banned substance. It was likely like, some topical pain killer or whatever is on the list of maybe you could argue that's like a performance enhancing thing. I don't know. I just hate. I can't speculate on any of that. Really, he could.
But I mean, is it as simple as maybe like a blood test on the dog showed up?
Certainly something, but like the dogs were tested for these things, and something came up that was on the banned list of things that.
But why so late?
Why so late? Because there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of dogs. It's also like an important decision. And I think that in the past, the Iditarod has made these really like difficult decisions, maybe a little bit too quickly, especially when public decisions that, maybe could have been handled in a better way. I think they kind of have a little bit of a history of that. So maybe it's just a matter of them just be doing their due diligence and talking with Josh and saying, hey, man, I'm betting they've reached out to him. They said, this is what we have. Like, what do you know? Was it like, tell us your side of the coin. Let's deliberate with like the Iditarod committee, and make the best choice, given the information that we have. And so I think just doing these difficult decisions correctly once, instead of, we made this announcement, And actually, no, never mind. We're gonna reverse that.
Right.
It's like, all right, let's make sure that we're right before we take this away from Josh. I don't know if it's Josh or Joshua, but that's a bummer to hear.
I know.
Because I really was impressed with what he was doing. I saw him in the first third of the race. I was like, man, this guy, I hope he can get his ducks in a row. Understandably, I mean, every rookie's like that.
I mean, he seemed like wide-eyed in those first interviews.
Yeah, exactly. And then you see him just crush. Like, his team looked amazing at the finish line. I was there at looking at his dogs. His dogs looked so happy and stoked. And yeah, so I'm surprised to hear that and bummed. I hope, I'd love to. I think my first reaction is I'd love to hear what he has to say. Sure. But maybe it'd be better to just kind of quietly continue going about, hanging out with his dogs, go running and show up when he's ready to do it again. Or, maybe it's just a belt buckle and he's like, yeah, sorry, I gave them some topical ointment. I shouldn't have given them. It didn't really, in his opinion, maybe that didn't affect their performance, and he can still feel that satisfaction of getting them home. So who knows? There's a lot of we just don't have that much.
There's a lot to speculate on there, but just
bummed to hear that.
Yeah. I was like, dang. I was just kind of like, dang. How have I not seen this on social media? No one, So
I mean, I think that's kind of on purpose.
I mean,
people don't want
people just who follow the Iditarod, who make posts about the Iditarod and stuff. Like, it's possible they made.
Where did you find it?
See, but on the Iditarod website.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, I was looking for. I figured they might have an article for the last 5 that signed up, and I didn't see that. And I was just kind of scrolling, and I was like, wait, what? When I saw the headline, so that's how I found it. But anyway,
well, we wish him the best, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool dude. I did a great job out on the trail, and I think if you're a fan, don't be too quick to judge these situations. Like, I think everybody's like, there might be people that are kind of look down on. Oh, I can't believe you do that. Just like you don't know the situation. I don't know the situation. I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt to a fault. I'm always an innocent till proven guilty kind of guy. So, obviously Iditarod found him guilty of something in Rule 39. We don't know how serious or not serious it was.
Yep.
And, I think it's worth noting that there's some things they gave us like a good amount of information. I think there's some things kind of worth maybe not sharing every detail. This, it's like a family here in Mushing. It's a tight knit community. We've got a lot of people watching the Mushing world from places where they've never really been around sled dogs or working animals, or they just, it's not like we need to give every single detail to every single person in the world, because obviously I have to view it as like if me and Brendan and our parents had a feud, we don't need to tell the neighbors about it. We can just say, hey, Bill, they ask us how we're doing. Like, well, the family's in a little bit of a funk right now. That's kind of what Iditarod's doing. They're like, hey, we did have this thing happen. It's not, we don't need to tell you every little thing, but obviously he gave the dogs tested positive for something they shouldn't have.
Yeah. I mean,
we're going to have to follow the rules. If they're written, that's it.
Yeah.
You don't need to know more. The rest is going to be figured out between Josh and the race. If he wants to share more, he's more than welcome to. And this might be the end of this story.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's very rare when someone violates the rule that they give more detail than they violated that rule.
And they did welcome him back to the race. So it's obviously like not.
He's still in good standing.
Sitting there, like doing some really fucked up thing. Like he was just like, oh shit, I gave this thing that I give my dogs after I take them on a long run in training because I know I'm going to give them a few days off. Well, I gave him to him during the race. It's something I'm used to giving my dogs, but I just kind of, you're not allowed to use it in the middle of an event. You can use it at the end kind of thing.
Right. Got you. Well, anyways, I just saw that. I was like, all right, well, I'm going to ask you about it and we can talk about it a little bit. But yeah, we should move on and give a little preview of our interview with Calvin. Like I said at the beginning of this intro, we thoroughly enjoyed our time. We got lost in a lot of different types of conversation, not just about mushing. And I think I like towards the end, I'm like, yeah, it's been about an hour, a little low, and like Sean's like, dang, that literally flew by. So yeah, what was your impressions of Calvin and in our time together with him?
I think it just seems like a really nice kid, even though he's not a kid, he's an adult. But I mean, he's one of the younger ones in there, and he just seems like he works hard, has a good attitude, has a good head on his shoulders, means well, tries hard, does his due diligence. Just seems like a bunch of positive things. Obviously I don't know him like super, super well, but I've hung out with him a few times. He just seems like a good guy. And that's kind of fun. The good thing, we like to see new faces and, becoming kind of, part of the mushing scene. And obviously he's not like super new. He's been around for a couple of years around the Copper Basin, and he ran the Iditarod, and he's got that experience under his belt from last year. Obviously, pretty bummer of an ending for him, having a dog suddenly collapse and pass away like in the middle of a run. Everything was going great. Veterinarians saw that dog at the last checkpoint, said, "Oh my gosh, dogs look amazing, look happy." Nothing of note, and just had a sudden event of that can happen to athletes, and they didn't have any clear explanation as to why it happened, but what was clear is that it wasn't on Calvin. That the dogs were well trained and well taken care of, and he did everything right by the dogs. And just unfortunately, the tragedies can happen in life, and they happened to him. And he had Laura there to help him get through those tough moments and get the Shack Tulik. So I'm really proud of him for getting back in the race this year. I think it's a really tough, Isaac kind of battle with that. Deford, he was signed up, decided I need a little more time. So, Hunter's back in it. He had that happen to him. So it's just cool to see Calvin just kind of get back on the horse, so to speak. And he had such a great race leading up to that. Super chill schedule. Dogs doing really well. So he has just like a lot of good things to build from last year. And I think he knows that. And we got to talk about his Iditarod experience and his mountaineering experience. And
dude, that the mountaineering stories are like that's the first part of our interview with him. And like, man, we went down the rabbit hole there, and I enjoyed hearing his perspective. Like in Georgia, I live near something called Stone Mountain. I think it's like, what is it? 1,500, 2,000 feet up. It's not tall at all.
No, it's 860 feet.
Oh gosh, you know it. And there's nothing like big around here. And then Sean's like, "Oh yeah, I've done some stuff having lived in Alaska, but nothing like what he was talking about." So yeah, we hope you guys enjoy that story. That's like a little off the path of what we normally spend time on, but it was fun to hear him talk about that,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's seems like he just loves, going through those difficult adventures. And there's a lot of really good life lessons you can learn going and climbing whatever mountain it is, literally, or if it's going and doing your sprint triathlons like Brennan likes to do, or it's just you trying to get your promotion at work, doing those. For some people, you just got to get yourself out there and do these literally physically difficult things that are obviously also mentally difficult. He likes doing that, and he's got that fortitude that he's proven to have time and time again. Done stuff down in South America and some big alpine high altitude mountains, and so I was really happy to talk to him, and we had a good time, and hope to see him here over the Christmas break. I'll be nearby, so we had a good time chatting with Mr. Daugherty.
Yeah, I think that word fortitude is a good word to describe his ethic, and it was a good time, and hope you guys enjoy this episode, and thank you guys for listening. Alrighty, folks, welcome back. We've got our next guest on. We'd like to welcome on Calvin Daugherty. How's it going, man?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, definitely, man. So we were just chatting. Tell us a little bit about where you're at this time of the year.
So currently I'm down in Sterling, Alaska, down here on the Kenai Peninsula. Got to say I love it down here on the peninsula. It's one of my favorite regions of the state. I've been down here. This will be my third winter running dogs with Mitch Seavey, Seavey's Iditarod kennel.
Right on. And so I guess tell me a little bit more about where are you from? Tell me a little bit about your growing up and stuff.
Kind of all over. So I grew up mostly on the East Coast in Florida, Pennsylvania. I spent a few years over in Salt Lake City, just moving around a lot as a kid, mostly for my dad's job, for his work. And then about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, we moved to Alaska to sort of get into dogs and start mushing.
Nice.
Yeah, I got to share the trail with Larry, your dad, at least one of the Iditarods, if not both. And yeah, he's super nice guy, and he's done some incredible things, not just on the Iditarod trail, but also mountaineering and stuff. I'm sure he's dragged you up a mountain once or twice. I'm sure. Isn't that kind of a rite of passage for you and your siblings?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a Daugherty rite of passage to go do some big adventure with my dad. And he's been a big influence, not just on me, but on our whole family, in just terms of adventuring and, sort of chasing your goals and your dreams and that sort of thing. So he's definitely been a big impact on me and my mushing career.
How many siblings do you have?
I've got an older sister, Bailey, and then a younger sister, Azalea, and 2 younger brothers. So there's 5 of us total.
5. And okay. And so what's your on the mount? I know that I always see, I haven't kept in touch too closely with your dad, but we're friends on Facebook. I see what he posts and stuff, and he seems like he's always out in the Himalayas. Have you've explored the Alaska range? If I'm not mistaken. What's one of your mountaineering, accomplishments or stories you got?
Okay, so the first time I was in the Alaska range was with my dad a few years ago after I graduated high school. He took me to climb Denali. It's sort of like a celebration of graduating, which is kind of a awesome senior trip for me to get to go and spend a few weeks with my dad in the mountains, and totally fell in love with the Alaska range and really rejuvenated my excitement with being in the mountains. So I decided to come back a couple years later and do another route on Denali called the Cassin Ridge with a buddy of mine. So it's just me and my friend in the range. We spent 25 days on Denali, mostly because of weather. We were just kind of sitting and waiting for the storms to clear out. And that was a really fun trip, just being on my own. We were attempting to tackle something called the Cassin Ridge, which is a more technical route up Denali than I had done previously with my dad. We just sort of did the generic West Buttress, which is what about 90% of climbers do on Denali. And I'd been successful on the West Buttress at some point at Denali, and I was really eager for more. And so Dalton, he's my friend, we went to go climb the Cassin Ridge. And towards the end of our expedition, as we were gearing up to set out for the ridge, we were coming up and over something called the Seattle Ramp, which is how you get from base camp, which is at 14,000 feet on Denali, over to the East Fork of the Kahiltna Glacier. And as we're going down this ramp, we're seeing all these heavily crevassed areas, and we're trying to navigate through all this terrain. And Dalton's in front of me, leading the rope team, and all of a sudden he just disappears and he's gone. And I was like, oh shit, he's in a crevasse. So I fall on my ice axe, self-arrest him, and the rope had gone pretty tight, so I'm assuming he probably fell pretty far. I'm trying to yell at him, trying to communicate, can't hear anything. So I start setting up my anchor and got a picket. And luckily there was some ice in the area that I was at. So I sank a couple screws and started rigging up a crevasse rescue system to pull him out. And then sort of rappelled down to where he was. And I could see he'd fallen about 30 feet deep down into this hole. Luckily, he was totally okay. No injuries, no broken bones or anything like that. He was just barely suspended above the ledge where he would have hit the ground. So I was able to pull him out, and that was sort of like a no shit moment for us. And then we kept going, and we're obviously a little bit phased. And then that whole day or series of days just kind of turned into a few series of misadventures. We almost got wiped out by an avalanche. We had to bail off of the ridge. Had to climb back up the Seattle ramp, and that was a pretty humbling couple of days in the mountains for me. Just a big learning experience, but a lot of fun. Just messing around with my buddy out there, just learning that the mountains can really chew you up and spit you out sometimes. So, yeah, that was one of my more recent mountaineering adventures or misadventures.
How did you guys end up? How far up did you go?
So
on the
from
second
the bottom
one?
of on the second trip, we didn't make it very far. We didn't even make it to the top of the Japanese Kalor, which is the first sort of stretch of the Cassine Ridge. I just think we were pretty phased from what had just happened, and honestly, probably not ready for it as far as our technical ability and our physicality. I had just gotten off a season of training dogs and racing dogs all year, so I probably wasn't in the best shape that I could have been. So we ended up turning around and calling it quits. But it was a fun time, just hanging out in Denali, meeting lots of cool people, hanging out with the rangers and other climbers. So yeah, overall a good experience, because I feel like sometimes when you come back from a mountain or really from any kind of adventure, people want to know, like, did you summit or did you finish? And that's sort of their first question. But honestly, the more I reflect on it, it's like something that my dad would always say is the journey is for the soul and the summit is for the ego, which I think is more true and true the more times I go out into the wilderness, whether it be with dogs or on a mountain or just in general.
It's a good saying.
I think
a good Larryism. I'm just saying that's a good saying. That's a good Larryism right there.
Yeah,
sure.
the one thing I've heard in my circles of just anything, even if it's just like going out hiking on like a crappy day, or especially when you're like backcountry skiing, which it doesn't even take, you don't even have to go like that far from like a city to be in like serious, avalanche territory. And
especially in Alaska.
Yeah. So it's like, if you ever just have like that feeling of like, I don't know, and you turn around, like you just cannot, and you sound like you obviously have got a great attitude about how you got out there, didn't, maybe you wanted to get to the top that you already have anyways. And so there's, you probably were even a little bit less like, you're like, I've already been up there. I don't. And also, but yeah, I think that's something for me, even if I'm going up to like the top of Flat Top or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I'm not feeling it today, whether it's, for whatever list of reasons, and you just can't. Yeah. I have an ego issue is what I'm saying. I'm talking about me, not you. Turning around is just sometimes I get hard. I'm like, I'm up here. I got to get up there. It's like, just go. If you want to go home and have an early dinner, do it,
Yeah, for sure. Another thing I've always heard is, that for like at the worst day of the mountain is better than the best day at work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably about same with mushing, but maybe, also like if you're working and you're just like giving sled dog tours, or you're like, it's ripping 70-mile-an-hour winds at 20 below. I don't know. I'd probably rather be giving tours, than be working.
Yeah. There's a little bit of leeway there.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's awesome. So me and Brennan, I want to just real quick, a little more off topic, but me and Brennan have been going through like a musical renaissance lately. We've been really vibing with this band and listening to a lot of music and stuff. And I'm just wondering, what are you listening to musically?
Yeah, man. So,
or podcasts or whatever.
For sure. This summer, actually, I was seeing a lot of Blackwater Railroad. My girlfriend Sadie's pretty into them and got me into them. And we went to a bunch of their shows and got pretty hooked on some of their music. Been listening to some of them on the trail. But overall, I just kind of like any kind of music, particularly like, I guess, rock music is kind of my go-to. And then as far as podcasts go, I like Lex Friedman a lot. He's pretty good. I listen to him sometimes when I'm out there on the trail. And also audiobooks. I don't know if you guys are into audiobooks, but I thought.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I got a good couple good books I'm listening to. The Terror, which is about, they have a show on Netflix, but there's a book too about this boat that went down to went across the Northwest Passage, got shut in, got frozen, stuck in ice, and it was an actual ship, but they like, it's like historical fiction, so they, or maybe not, because I don't know if you met people up here, Calvin, that are like look you dead in the eyes, like super seriously, and I'm not talking one crazy guy, I'm talking like sensible people with like serious, like they're not joking. You'll be like, yeah, the Yeti, and they're like, and me and Brennan would laugh about a Yeti or the abominable snowman, whatever you want to call it. But there's like a native word for it. I don't know what it is, but like you go to certain villages and certain zones, then they're like, dude, don't joke about that. It's not funny. Like, it's a real thing. We've seen it, and there's been stories passed down from generations and generations. I don't know if you've ever had.
With the Yuli? I just did a quick search. I'm just throwing it out there.
My point is, I'm reading a book about Yeti just fucking up this ship in the Northwest Passage, and it's pretty fun.
It sounds entertaining. Terror is what it's called. I'll have to write that down.
The Terror. They got a show too. If you don't want to listen or read, you can watch this.
I think the book's always better. So I'm gonna have to check that out.
Pretty good show too, though. So that's no one asked for that recommendation, but I gave it to you.
Well, I appreciate it. Kind of reminds me of a book I read last year called Endurance, about Shackleton's voyage to the South Pole. Yeah, that one was such a page turner for me, man.
I love those adventure books, and you talk about mountaineering. Like like one of the first books I read was Minus 148 when I came up here to Alaska, the first winter ascent of Denali. Some guy like day one, some guy just like gone down the crevasse. They weren't just like, oh, it's day one, we're just chilling, walking, it's flat, and the conditions look good, and then this guy just disappeared, gone and into a crevasse dead day one. They're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So
shit just got real.
Yeah. So we're glad that Dalton only fell 30 feet, and you knew exactly what you're doing with the crevasse rescue.
Yeah, it was definitely, like I said, a humbling experience. I've never had anything like that happen to me, specifically, like being the one that had to rescue somebody out of the crevasse. We're just glad that we had taken the time before to, freshen up on our rope skills and our rescue skills. So you never know what's going to happen out there, whether you're on a dog team or out in the mountains. You got to be prepared.
That's so insane. That is so insane. So I'm curious if there's like a story behind the first time you guys met. Was it out on the Iditarod Trail this year, or had y'all crossed paths prior to that?
I don't remember in the first time. I don't know if you do. I think actually maybe the first time could have been on the Denali Highway, and like you maybe were camped out or turning around at that place right next to Jesse's, that campground, Brushcana. And you were maybe with what's his face from Oklahoma.
Was that with Jim Lanier, or was that with Mitch's dogs? Because I felt like I had seen you.
Maybe
I felt like I feel like I'd seen you sometime, like in packing in Capri.
Yeah, I think we had like a couple of like, we're both mushing our dog teams and we're got shit going on, but hey, how's it going? I'm pretty sure that's Larry, or I'm sorry, Calvin. And you're like, I'm pretty sure that's Sean, but we kind of wave and then, see you in 6 months or whatever, kind of thing. That's often how it goes when you're out on training on the Denali Highway. It's like, if you have a chill trained team and you can just afford to stop and chat for a minute, you would. But oftentimes it's like in a spot when you have 2 16 dog teams next to each other and they're kind of jazzed up, and you're like, as much as I want to socialize, I think there'd be zero drama if we just went straight on.
Yeah. You could shoot the shit in a more chill environment.
And which we did, which we saw each other at a Hope, who was playing maybe.
Was that John Craigie? Was that
John Craigie?
That
yeah.
night? Yeah, that's right. That was
fun.
Before that, I had ran into you a couple times on the Iditarod Trail.
Yes.
I think the first time was in Rainy Pass, I want to say.
It must have been in the one before that, Finger Lake is where I was.
Finger Lake.
And then I saw you in Cripple and we got to hang out for a while. And I loved Cripple. I loved, and I got to spend a lot of time like with the middle back of the pack during the race. And, it's nice because maybe a little more time to talk. And even then, the front of the race, they were always willing to exchange a few words. But yeah, it was good to see you in Cripple. I got a photo. I think I tried to send your mom. I think she may have gotten it, but I should send it to you now at the end of this. And it's a good photo of you.
Yeah, my mom actually showed it to me after the race, and you definitely looked like you were having a good time out there. So it was cool to see your face.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but for me, when on the trail, you see, even if it's just like some guy I met once, I'm like, I know that guy. Like,
yeah,
it's good to see somebody I know because there's you don't get to see. If you're lucky, maybe I think your family did fly in maybe to Finger Lake. It must have been because I think I saw them there. Yeah.
My dad was doing some helicopter training, and his instructor, he was able to talk him into flying him out to Finger Lake. So they stopped by, said hi from it.
He's like, "Come on, man, let me do it."
Yeah, and it's always great to see familiar faces out there for sure.
Nice. So you've worked with Jim Lanier's dogs for a time. It sounds like I honestly sounds familiar, but I didn't even know that. That's pretty. They got a badass team. All the white dogs, which is I'm always like that's got to be kind of tricky to keep track of a bunch of white dogs.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing when I showed up at the kennel. That's actually where I started mushing. That's where I rode on a sled for the first time, and I got introduced to everything. Shortly after my family moved to Alaska in 2014, this was just like a few weeks later, we had moved from Jacksonville, Florida, and we go over to Jim's house to meet his dogs. And my dad's like, I want to get qualified for the Iditarod. And so they had to talk about it. And my dad started helping him train, basically helped Jim get ready for Iditarod that year. And my dad was able to run some of his dogs in qualifiers. But at Jim's kennel, there's kind of a funny joke about like he getting a tangle on the trail. It's like, grab the white dog. They're all white dogs. They can be a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure you spend a couple months in the yard or a couple weeks and you got it down. But from the outside looking in, I'm like, dude, what? I see them rolling in. I'm like, there's no chance. I already struggle with like human names, let alone dog names, let alone all identical-ish looking dogs. But
so real quick, I got to jump in here. Your dad moved your family completely relocated from sunny Florida to Alaska.
Jaguars.
And straight up, your dad knew he was coming and wanted to run the Iditarod right off the bat, huh?
Yeah. So for my dad, this all started a long time ago when he was a young kid. His grandparents were big fans of Iditarod and adventures and travels like he is. And back in the middle of the 80s, he got a postcard from his grandparents about the Iditarod, and he sort of planted the seed that he wanted to travel to Alaska and give the dog a run the race. But it was just sort of like a childhood dream. Like, probably was never going to happen. And when he met my mom, we told her, like, before they got married, at some point in my life, I'm going to need to go out. And then we were living in Florida. He saw an ad in the newspaper for this thing called Fjell Raven Polar. It's put on by a company in Europe. It's like this big fundraising event. If you win, you can trip this all expenses paid trip to Scandinavia. 2015, my dad ended up winning a spot. He got back from that trip and was like, all right, we need to go off. That's sort of how that went.
Dang. That's all that, man. Wow. And then he did what, five 5 in 6 years, and that's dang.
Yeah, he kind of got bit by the bug.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how it goes.
And then you got bit by the bug.
Yeah, sort of as a byproduct of that. I grew up kind of a city boy and didn't have a lot of experience in the wilderness, other than going off with that little bit. But coming to Alaska, sort of get thrown into it was really, really cool for me. Just sort of spent my formative years going out on the back of the 4-wheeler with my dad and figuring out, what running dogs is all about. I acquired a passion for it. And in high school, I decided to run the junior Iditarod. And so I started going over to Jim's kennel and would help feed stuff before school and after school. Would head over there. Luckily, only live at 5. Worked out super well. Drive over to school, feed the dogs, run the dogs. You go out on weekend camping trips, and then that year I got to run the dog. That was the 2020. That was my first race.
Gotcha. Talk about the junior Iditarod experience. You said you ran that one time, or
dude, Wade Marsh told us that's the toughest Iditarod qualifier because it's 275 or 80-mile runs, and which that's a pretty tough for anybody, let alone a 14 to 17-year-old.
Yeah, 2 really long runs, and unfortunately, I was too old to do it again. So I think it was either 16 or 17 when I did it for the first time. Would have done it again the following year, but I think I was past the age cutoff. But super cool race, going out to Yetna and back. A really great group of mushers, I think, is really what did it for me. Made a lot of friends with the other junior mushers out there, and just had so much fun out on the trail with my dogs and camping out at Yetna. And then when I got to Yetna, it snowed like probably 2 feet overnight. Jeez. And we all like woke up and we were buried in snow, just like out there around this fire.
Did you close your sled bag when you went to sleep?
I just slept right in the snow. We all were just kind of talking.
Oh, yeah. They don't let you in, I think, on that race. That you camp out, and it's a long 8 hours. It's not like a quickie, get a nap.
Yeah, they don't let you inside. So we made this big bonfire and we're all just like hanging out talking, and then one by one drifted off to sleep and woke up. And it was a pretty long run going back with all deep snow. I think it was like a 10 or 12-hour run. But man, it was just so cool being out there and having that racing experience. I can remember right before the start, just feeling like the pre-race jitters and all the excitement, and then finishing in the banquet. And I can safely say I was pretty hooked.
Nice. And so this is a good segue. So you got that's your first Iditarod qualifier right there. And then did you have some gap years in there, or did you go like next year keep running dogs? Have you been basically since that junior Iditarod every winter, or did you take a winter away, or what?
I did take a break. Yeah. So after I graduated, I went to Fairbanks to go to school for a year. And after about a semester, I pretty much knew it wasn't for me, but finished out the school year and then decided to drop out of college. And then that summer, I went and worked on the glacier for Mitch, and that really sort of reawakened the passion. And I knew this is what I need to be doing. I don't need to be in school right now. So I just sort of dropped everything and committed to a winter season here at the kennel. That would have been 2021, I think, or 2022. And showed up with, a little bit of experience from gyms, but honestly, not a whole lot of experience. And my role was just kind of to be a handler and help out, mostly with the race teams. But shortly after I got here, the guy that was training the A team, Grayson, just up and quit and left, and kind of left Mitch hanging. So that opened up a huge opportunity for me to be heavily involved with training the A team, and was able to knock out my other 2 qualifiers that winter. So I went and did the Copper Basin 300 and Willow 300, and got to be somewhat competitive in both of those races. Was running the A team at a somewhat competitive level.
Nice. That's probably 22 races, or the 23 races.
It would have been the 23 races. Yeah.
Okay. So nice. Yeah. It was like 22, 23 winter was your first winter at Mitch's.
Yep.
Okay. Right on. And I'm just piecing together the timeline here. And yeah, so then you said the Willow 300. So, dude, the Willow people, like every time I hear Willow, they're like someone has to say like, oh, it's probably one of the more chill 300s, but like, it's still 300 miles on a dog sled, and I've like heard some pretty like brutal races in some years. How was your Willow 300 experience?
Honestly, it was great. We had really good conditions. It was in the 20s the whole race, and we had a lot of snow. There was a little bit of open water I can remember, just some overflow. But other than that, it was honestly a super easy trail and a really fun race. So I had a great experience on the Willow. It was a week after the Copper Basin, so following the Copper Basin, it was sort of like a walk in the park, to be honest with you.
Nice. It wasn't. Yeah, I had a similar experience, and going doing the Quest 300 and then the Goose Bay 150, and I had the same attitude going into the race, but actually wasn't that easy for me for whatever reason. Just like the dogs did fine, but I was just like, what the fuck, dude? This is like, it was like an 86 mile. It's 86 miles one way, and then you go and do it's like a junior Iditarod vibes. And I was just like,
do you break up those runs? Because man, that's a long ways.
I think maybe it was like 81. I don't know, but it was, yeah, no, I didn't. Because my understanding was it was 75, and the dogs were fit, and we had just done the Quest a few weeks ago, but they'd had time to recover. Maybe it was like a week, and we took some of the dogs. So, but they were like in good cardio shape, and we had done like some long runs in the Quest, doing the Birch Creek run back to back, and so they, I was like, we can do this for whatever. But man, I always wish I would have camped out. I think in hindsight, I think the dogs performed well, but it's just like, I just don't like doing long runs. It's just not for me that fun. I think maybe the dogs are also kind of like, all right, like it's a pretty long one, dude. And then we turn right back around and do it again. And like, there's like, they could looking back at me like, so we're running it back, huh? Is that what we're doing? Okay. And they're like, all right, boss, if that's what you say, but they did good. They did good. But yeah, those are long runs. I prefer personally, I wouldn't do long runs moving forward, but it was like, you can't know if you like them or don't, or if the dogs like them or don't until you give it a go. And they were prepared for it, but yeah, but yeah, anyway, so you did the Copper Basin, right? And then boom, right into the Willow. You're like, it's probably be a little more chill. And it was. That's pretty sweet. 20 degrees. Love that. What was the Copper like?
The Copper was a different story. Honestly, it was challenging, especially being my first 300-mile race. And I was also on a pretty minimal rest schedule, which I was pretty nervous about, just as far as being able to, stay confident, stay awake, that sort of thing. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, looking back, that was probably the most fun I ever had on a race. Was my first year in the Copper. Luckily, it wasn't super cold. You always hear all these horror stories about the Copper Basin being 50 below zero and 60 below zero. Luckily, it was, I think, at the coldest, maybe 25 below or 30 below, that's still, it's real cold, but it's bearable. And yeah, that race was just a lot of fun. I had an incredible team of super athletic dogs, and they crushed it. I think I got 9th place in that race, and that was the race that really made me think like, yeah, I want to do this probably for a little while.
That's an epic. I mean, that trail is so awesome that I personally, there's a couple runs, the hump run, and then there's that one like sub 50-mile run that you're weaving through the trees. I don't remember which one it is, but I was like, this is so fun. And it was, I don't know, it depends what direction you go, but it can be earlier to middle of the race. But yeah, minimum rest, at least the Copper Racing, you got 18 hours is the minimum. So it's still like, it's not like the Cusco, but yeah, it's still your first 300 and the toughest, as they say, the toughest 300 miles in Alaska. That's on the Copper Basin website. I'm sure some other 300-mile races might have something to say about that, but I think they're onto something, especially, it's notorious for having the softer trails, even though sometimes it can be good. Like I told that to Jason Severs, like, that's softer trails. You guys put it in. They're not well traveled. He was like, yeah. I mean, they do a lot of work on that trail, but ultimately, it's not like a highway like it is on the Cusco. people are using it to travel back and forth. It's literally like pickup trucks are using the Mushing Trail to drive on the river, and
that's
of course,
crazy.
Like you experienced on the Iditarod on the Yukon River, those are highway. It's a highway, the Yukon River, both in the summer and the winter. So those are usually little bit better trails than the Copper. But what do you think, like the difference in, like, you have to, obviously you got the grit, your dad's got the grit, of like that you can get from mountaineering, you long 20-hour pushes and on the mountain, but this one, I met a guy that lives here, Bob Hempstead, and he had summited the 7 tallest mountains on all the continents, and he had also run the Iditarod, which is probably a pretty short list of people. And he was like, I was like, which one was the hardest? And he was like, it's not even close, because he's like, dude, when I do the mountaineering, it's like I just am worrying about me. It's like, oh yeah, how am I doing? Do I need water? Do I need food? And you're worrying about 14, 15, 16 dogs, and that is like what do you think? Compare and contrast the Alaska Range experience with your Copper Basin, Willow, Iditarod. What is similar and what is different?
Yeah, I think you honestly kind of hit the nail on the head, just about having to worry about yourself versus, a group of 16 dogs on the Iditarod. I would say the biggest difference between the two is when you're in the mountains, it's all just sort of physical, and, you're only paying attention to yourself. Whereas on a dog sled, you have to have a lot more attention and awareness of every single dog, and you're constantly worrying about every single one of them. And the mental toll when you're mushing is much larger than when you're in the mountains, because even though you're on Denali, you have objective hazard, you have crevasses, you have Serac fall, you have avalanche. You got to be cautious and look out for those things.
It's
a couple teammates, that you guys are all sort of looking out for each other, and you're on a rope team, so it's pretty safe. Something happens, somebody's going to pull you out of a crevasse, or you have that support network of other climbers that are there, other rangers that are on the mountains, which certainly on the Iditarod and other races there is a support network of people that can come rescue you, but for the most part, you're on your own out there. It's just you and the dogs, and you have a lot of responsibility. I think that's the big thing, is the responsibility that you have, and just the fanatical attention that you have to be constantly, aware of every single thing that's going on. So mushing definitely takes a bigger mental toll, I would say.
Yeah.
And then but physically, obviously the mountain climbing is more of a physical thing, or is it still?
Yeah, I mean, I would say hands down. Yeah, when you're in the mountains, it's a lot more physical for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So your 23, 24 season, I don't know if you were in any events, but how did training go for you? Like, when were you getting an early start? Was I'm sure if you're on the Mitch program, I'm assuming you're talking a minimum of 3,000 miles on the dogs, if not closer to 4. But yeah, what was training like going into the rookie Iditarod?
Yeah, we got after it pretty hard that year. I started, I think, the first day of September, and the dogs had just come off of running all summer in Seward and on the glacier doing tours. So they already had a pretty good base of doing lots of short miles, short runs. And then in September, we jumped right into fall training, doing 5s and 10s and then 20s. And I think we put on close to 4,000 miles that season. I was on my own for most of the winter, training the A team myself. And then sometime in the end of December, Jonathan Hayes showed up with his son, and they helped out for January for prepping for the Copper and the Willow. They were there to run both of those races so that John could get qualified. And that was a big help, having some more hands to run dogs and another musher to run a sled behind me. And then after John left, Christian Turner came to the kennel for about a month and a half because he was going to take the A team and go run Iditarod with them. And that was a big moment for me because I had somebody who was a lot more experienced than me and was a big mentor to me. And so I was really excited when Christian got there and definitely learned a lot from him. And yeah, just ignited the fire for me to keep getting after it even harder. So it was a great season overall. A lot of learning.
So go ahead, Brennan.
I was just gonna say, based on we had Christian on, and that had to be a fun month and a half of training with him. He just seems like such a fun guy, and to like have that dynamic with you training and stuff. And you said like that mentor aspect of things, that had to be a nice little like icing on the cake to your season there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough good things about Christian. He's a really funny guy, great musher, just great friend. We've stayed in touch every now and then since then. So that probably, looking back, was one of my favorite parts of the season, was getting to train with him and help him get ready for Iditarod. Christian's a really good dude.
Yeah, especially after all the time. I'm sure. Well, at least you had. I'm sure there was other people at the kennel that you got to hang out with and stuff. But to be, out there training alone, and then you get Christian to come on. I'm sure there's some lows in training for you and for anybody, and then you get that extra boost of energy of just a new person. It's kind of like, I've imagined working on the glacier. You got the same people all summer, and then someone new comes up on the glacier. You're like, oh, okay, like this is at least going to get maybe have a fun 1 or 2 days. Now we got some new blood. So
yeah, definitely just that new energy and just having somebody new to talk to. And Christian definitely brought all that and more, coming off working in Australia, coming up pretty fresh and super Jones to get out on the Iditarod. Right. So yeah, it was really cool getting to train with him.
So when you put on 4,000 miles, Brent does that, Dallas does that, probably another decent list of mushers.
You think Jesse does that?
Oh yeah, and then I'm sure you could come up with a couple more names, Brennan and Calvin, but the for Dallas, like I know that we at least have one instance where we're taking like 14 straight days of no running in harness, where they take a long break, and just you got all these like little, it's usually like minor things that you can't even necessarily like identify about the dogs. Like it can be like, I don't know, like they're probably at like 90% like physically, imagine thinking of like week 15 in the NFL, or like 75 games in the NBA season. These guys are still fit to play, but like you want to get them like back to as close to 100% as you can. So like what kind of breaks like do you guys take, a couple days off, couple days running, couple days off, or is it like you have one big one? What do you do for the R&R for the team?
I guess I'll sort of break that down into fall training and winter training, because those two are pretty different. So in fall training, for the most part, the dogs are running usually 6 days a week, 6 days on. And then if I'm going to take a day off, the dogs will get a day off as well. And we'll stick to that for pretty much all the way up until 40s, and even on 40-mile runs for a little while. So the dogs will be either going 2 days on, 1 day off, or 6 days on, 1 day off, for a few weeks up until we get to our first training series, where we do a series of 40-mile runs linked together with rests. And the first series for the A team might look something like 240 miles. So you got 6 40-mile runs. And then after doing a big series like that, they'll get at minimum a week off of absolutely no running. And then after that week off, we do a build-up. So we do a 5-mile run one day, 10-mile run the next day, and then 20-mile run the following day. And then after that 20, then we jump into another series. And the following series will be a little bit more intense. Maybe it won't be longer runs per se, but shorter rests. It just depends on what sort of race or what sort of dog team we're trying to train. And then the series, they just keep building up and building up until I guess around February time, like right before the Iditarod, we'll do a big sort of a mini Iditarod is what Mitch likes to call it. And that might be 400 or 500 miles, but broken up with a 24-hour break. So they would do, let's say, a 300-mile series and then a 24-hour break, and then maybe another 100 or 200 more miles on top of that. So I guess that's sort of what the run to rest ratio looks like, at least in previous years. And I can't speak for Mitch, but I do think he might be starting to rethink his philosophy on overtraining the dogs a little bit, based off of changes that Dallas has made. I know you said you guys give them a couple weeks off sometimes, and so yeah, there's obviously a little bit of change in that, but generally that's how it's been while I've been here.
So I'm wondering, you're running Mitch's dogs. Like, how hands-on is Mitch? Is he around, or is he kind of giving you some of his wisdom, or is just kind of like you have access to his dogs and his setup, and then you're kind of executing what the game plan is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say Mitch's role at the kennel is sort of more where he'll lay out the plan and then we execute the plan. So he's not super hands-on involved with the day-to-day training of the dogs and that sort of thing, but he is very hands-on when it comes to having a schedule for the dogs, having whether that be a running schedule or feeding program, that sort of thing. He lays out pretty well and with a lot of detail most of the time. And so it's, you just kind of got to go by his plan because he's done this for a long time, his pretty much his whole life. And so, yeah, my role is just to execute the plan pretty much.
And the follow up to that is like, are you like kind of having these like check-in conversations with him like weekly, or is he around like on a daily basis to you, or like I'm just kind of curious what that setup is like.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's not really a day-to-day thing, I guess, most of the time. A lot of times Mitch is traveling. He's off going hunting and enjoying his retirement. It's more so just whenever he's down in the shop, that's when we can talk to Mitch and bring all of our questions to him. But we do check in with him, pretty regularly while he's traveling and just make sure, this is how you want things to be running. So yeah, it works out pretty well.
Nice. I was just curious.
What was the level of experience of your dog team before the 2023, 2024 training season?
Before like going into it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty mixed. The team that I ended up taking on Iditarod was sort of a half and half of the leftovers from the puppy team and the leftovers from the A team. Because that year we gave a bunch of our best dogs to Dallas to help him out so he could go win the race. So I kind of got whatever was left over between Dallas and Lara. So Lara Kittleson was training the 2-year-olds, and she ended up running the Iditarod with a team of pups. So I had 10 A-team dogs that didn't make the cut with Dallas. Those were anywhere from 3 to 6 years old. So a lot of experience on those guys. A lot of those dogs like hip hop. I got to run in my qualifiers. So I had a bit of time working with those guys. And they were definitely the core of my race team. And then the other 6 were pups that had only done a couple of races. They did, I believe, the Connect 200. No, they didn't do the Connect 200 that year. They just did the Copper Basin. So they hadn't done much racing at all. But they had put on roughly 3,000 miles that season in training. So they had a pretty good base of miles on them. And there was a lot of phenomenal dogs in that group. There was some really good leaders that I tried to sort of emphasize more on the younger dogs and give them a chance to run up and lead and get some good training and good experience on them.
Yeah. And of course, goes without being said at this point, listeners know that Dallas had lost a bunch of dogs on those highway incidents. And so, yeah, you guys were, he was struggling to fill on his team. And so that was awesome that Mitch was able to hook it up and give him a team that, I saw his team in White Mountain, and it was like, he was showing me the dogs that were his all-stars, and he was just like, dude, this is like, you see what, like, he was kind of like, you see what I'm working with here, man? Like, it's not like he didn't have like this like like invincible team. He was like, you know, he had Sebastian and Frank, and I had like, you know, I've worked with those dogs, and I was just like, I can't believe these guys are like on the winning team. You know, they were kind of knuckleheads, and so, but it just like it's part, obviously there's the genetic aspect and the experience of the dog, but also just, you know, Dallas being such a good dog man. But the other part I was going to add to that was, you know, the dogs that you had, the leftovers, quote unquote, are capable of winning or top fiving for sure. It would given the, you know, right conditions, right team, right musher, right, you know, schedule or whatever. So it sounded like you had a pretty, you know, a great core, and then a lot of like those extra dogs that, so to speak, those like 11 through 16 dogs. Oftentimes you see this year after year, they're like barely made the team, so to speak. And then they end up, 2 of those 6 dogs end up being your best dogs, you know, and I'm curious to what you have to say on that, but talk us about like the Iditarod. You spent some time traveling with Lara, which must have been pretty cool to be seeing your homie out on the trail, and you know, yeah, you went across the entire state of Alaska. So what was like kind of the first half of that race? What were some highlights?
It was pretty baller, man, especially getting to run it with Lara. So we were on the same schedule, same run rest schedule. So we saw each other, I think, every single checkpoint of the race. And then also a lot of times on the runs, you know, we would travel together. If our dog teams were going the same speed, you know, we would hang out and camp and travel together. But man, the first half of the Iditarod was magical. I mean, it was a dream come true to be out there. Some of my favorite runs were the gorge, you know, going up Rainy Pass and then down the gorge in the middle of the night. It was super cool, really fun. It was really good conditions. And then as we got, you know, more into the interior of Alaska, it was a totally different experience getting out to the villages like Nikolai and then Grass and going further north. And I just felt like it kept getting better and better. You know, I just like was having more and more fun every single run, and just loving every second of it. Getting to McGrath was a huge relief. You know, getting my 24-hour, especially because I had a broken sled. I busted my sled up pretty good in the burn. So it was nice to get there and swap it out and get a spare sled. And also just all the incredible people that I met out there, just blown away by the support of you guys, you know, the volunteers, the vets, and also just the locals, people that live out there in those communities were just so supportive and friendly. And that really was just the cherry on top of the cake for me, just being so welcomed by everybody and just having such a good time meeting other mushers, hanging out with their dogs. And yeah, just probably the coolest thing I've ever done.
Oh yeah. It's a special trail, man. And yeah, getting to see those communities and the different, it's funny. There's like some people are like so stoked that the race is happening in their village. And then some people are like, oh yeah, you know, just, I remember this one guy in Nikolai, we would just be standing around the fire, just like me and like 3 of the people that lived there. And it'd just be like quiet. And he'd be look over at me and be like, hey, how's it going? I'd be like, you know, I'm trying not to be like in their face, you know, like I'm an outgoing guy. I'm not trying to like over out them, you know, and not be like, hey, how's it going? My name's Sean. It's like, chill the fuck out, dude. Like, so I was like, let me play it cool. They were all hanging out by the fire, and I went up to the fire. I was like, yo, I just put out the vibe, you know. And the guy was like, hey, how's it going? I was like, pretty good. And that was about the end of it. And I was like, I like this guy.
Yeah,
this guy's cool, you know. And but he was like stoking the fire. He would transporting people back and forth to the gym and just like always like just grinding for the entire like 70 hours I was in Nikolai. This guy's just like always up and moving. He's just chilling. Just what's up, man? How you doing? Like not highs weren't high, lows weren't low. He's just there to help out. You know, a lot, like those kind of people aren't gonna be famous or in the race. You're not gonna see pictures of them or anything. But I was just like, I like that guy. Just quietly going to work, helping out. All right, we flew away. He's like, all right, we'll see you around. You know, that's it.
I wonder if that was the same dude that was in Nikolai when I was there, taking us up to the school and
it's almost certainly.
Yeah, he was. I mean, whoever it was, he was super chill and just like down to earth.
Chilling.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. What's up? It's good.
Hey, so I'm curious, did you have any like cool exchanges out there with any of the mushers, whether at a checkpoint or just like going through the race at any point?
Yeah, several of them. Couple that come to mind. I remember seeing Connor. We were going through the burn, and I think we were camping like halfway between Ronan and Nikolai. And there was a bunch of us. There, Laura was there, Lara was there, Connor was there. I think
was
Isaac
maybe there. Yeah,
Isaac was somewhere in the vicinity, and I'd actually just been hanging out with Isaac, and he was having sort of a rough run after busting his sled too, and we chatted on the trail for a little bit. And then Connor pulls up to this campsite. He's like, hey man, like, you got any snacks? Like, I don't have any snacks. Like, I didn't bring any food. And I'm like, dude, you didn't bring any food? Like, this is an 80-mile run. Like, what are you thinking? He's like, oh, I just raw dog it, man. You know, he was just like super cool.
Just nicotine and a dream.
Pretty much, yeah. He just got his cigarettes and just sending it for the boys. And I was like, damn, like this guy just like goes hard. I was like, okay, like I got some extra food for you, man. And he like came over and I gave him like a mountain house. And I of course had like totally overpacked and brought way too many snacks. So I give him like a gallon bag of snacks. I'm like, dude, I don't need any of these. Like, tear it up. And just got to hang out with him for a little bit, which was cool because I ended up seeing him again in Unilocleat after we had both scratched. We got to hang out in Unilocleat for a little bit with Deke. Deke was there too. And it was just kind of funny crossing paths again after it that we had been through. He obviously had some shit that he was dealing with his dogs, and then I had something happen to my team. So yeah, I mean, a lot of great mushers out there, and Connor was a good one for sure.
Yeah, I was in. I left Shaktoolik just before while you were on your run, basically, and I was landed. I landed and heard the terrible news, and obviously, literally the worst nightmare any musher could have. And we're sorry to hear that you lost the dog on the race. But what was your dog's name?
Henry.
Henry. What was and how old was Henry?
He was a 3-year-old. So he'd actually ran the Iditarod the previous year. TR.
Oh, with Gerhardt. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And so it sounds like, similar situation to Isaac, which I was there for. And, but, the necropsy from the vet race from Stu Nelson and the team, and rest in peace to Stu. But was inconclusive. Basically, my understanding is the most likely thing is a sudden cardiac event that you see happen with a marathon runner. That it's happened this year in marathon races. And so I know it's a sensitive subject, but I mean, it's like, is there anything, what do you have to do? You want to say anything? I don't want to be like, put you in a weird spot, but
yeah, man. Well, I mean, obviously it was tragic and probably the worst moment of my life up to that point. Seeing one of your teammates, one of your friends, one of your dogs just collapse. And to be totally honest, initially I wasn't concerned because we were traveling. We had just come down the hills and we were about 10 miles outside of Shaktoolik, going across some ice, and I thought, oh, he just slipped and fell. That was my initial reaction. So I stopped the team and go up to assess him. By the time I got there, I knew that nobody's home. It was pretty evident. Needless to say, I immediately administered CPR, frantically doing mouth-to-mouth breaths. And it was super fortunate that Laura Kittleson was less than a mile behind me. She came up on my team and assessed the situation and immediately knew what was going on. And she stopped, and I was really lucky and very thankful to have her there because she was so comforting and supportive. And I kept telling her, I was like, you just leave me. Like, you don't need to wait because I'm in shock and I don't know what to say. And she's like, I'm not going anywhere, Calvin. Like, I'm staying here and I'm gonna go with you into Shaktoolik. And I honestly, if she hadn't have been there, I think it would have been a lot worse, and I would have been even more of a wreck than I already was. So really thankful to Laura Kittleson. She's a great friend. And yeah, I mean, on top of the tragedy of losing a dog, I also had to process the fact that I'm going to be removed from the race. I'm going to be forcibly withdrawn, which of course I didn't care about nearly as much as Henry passing, but I just sort of felt like I was being kicked when I was down, and I felt a lot of outrage at the Iditarod, a lot of outrage at myself, and a lot of anger just at the whole situation. And that persisted for quite a while, to be honest, after the race, processing all the emotions of being so close from Nome and thinking I was going to finish with an incredibly strong team. And then now all of a sudden my race is over. And I've lost a dog forever. So the fallout of that was pretty rough. I had a lot of questions about why I was even doing this and if it was ethical or moral to be doing this. And after a lot of introspection and thinking back, a lot of people tell me that this sort of thing happens, and like you said, in marathons and humans, and that's totally true. And even if you look at house pets, if you look at sort of the statistics and the ratios of house pets, if you add up all the dogs that run Iditarod versus say the same number of house pets, you're going to find more fatalities in normal everyday house pets. So it's really nothing, I guess, out of the ordinary, and it's something that just happens. Super unfortunate, super unlucky, but it's just the world we live in. You're not going to live forever. And after all that, introspection and processing and thinking about it, I decided I got to finish this thing. So I'm going back in 2025 and hoping to finish in Nome.
Right on. Yeah, we appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. And yeah, it was just Henry's time, and yeah, it does bring into question a lot of things. I think it's the feeling you would feel. And look, and then you get to the race and you're like, you got all these other dogs looking up at you and they're like, all right, coach, like back to the routine, feed us, get some straw down, take our booties off and do your thing. And then, you gotta, the dogs are, I'm going out on a limb here. The rest of the team was like, let's keep cruising, and it's almost, I remember what Isaac told me is it's a disservice to the rest of the team, and to have to, for them to stop, they've been training all year for this. And yeah, it's a really complex and nuanced issue for the Iditarod. They feel like from a publicity standpoint, if they can't let someone continue, because then that would give culpability to the race because they let someone whose dogs passed away continue racing. So now you're just allowing that to happen. But then if you getting removed from the race is like, it implies that it was your fault, that because you got withdrawn. It's like, oh, well, yeah, this is what Calvin did to his dog. He got withdrawn. If they didn't say that, I did, but there is like a implication when you see the headline, and so, but then, where do you put that? Where do you draw that line? Would you have a vet? If the vet saw Henry and Uniloclete, what did the vet say about Henry and Uniloclete, for example?
I mean, all the vets, the entire race, not just in Uniloclete, had nothing to say about Henry. He was perhaps the healthiest dog on my team. Really good weight, really healthy, no injuries. He certainly wasn't the most athletic or hardest working dog on my team, but he was a survivor. He was always there, always doing his thing, just trotted along.
Good team dog.
Yeah, excellent team dog. I mean, nothing to write home about per se, but he was a great dog, and he'd ran the Iditarod the year before. He had been working, like you said, all season for that. And I did feel really deeply that it was a disservice to the rest of the team. Like you said, that, they had been building up for that for years, since they were yearlings, since they were puppies. And they absolutely could have gone and finished the race. They were very well rested and very, like, overly rested. I had a lot of rest, especially for how old my dogs were. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a complex issue and something that I've thought about a lot. And the implication to sort of the average viewer, somebody who doesn't know much about mushing or about the Iditarod, is that, yeah, this was my fault. And I certainly saw that reflected in the media and, people sending me hate mail and hate comments and seeing articles and that kind of thing. And it makes you question, like, oh shit, like maybe this is really my fault. So yeah, it's a tricky issue, and I hope the Iditarod will find some sort of a resolution. Rule 43.
Yeah, it is a tricky thing. Like, the only way to guarantee that no dog ever gets hurt, whether it's racing or it's in New York City, is you keep them in a bubble, and you like can't go anywhere ever. There's life has a risk, whether it's the Iditarod Trail or it's walking on the sidewalk and a car, the dog steps out onto the road and car hits it. There's an inherent risk to life. Brendan driving to go get dinner, could be his last drive. The only way to guarantee nothing would ever happen to any sled dog is you just have them sit at their house, and even that isn't a guarantee. Who knows? So it's just like you got, they love doing what they're doing. The dog, you can find solace in that fact that Henry was doing what he loved most, traveling on the Iditarod Trail, exploring. But man, yeah, that's what a difficult race for you and for Isaac and Hunter. And yeah, it is. It's like, you could say, oh, maybe if the vets said, oh, the team looks good, Henry looks good, and then this happens, you could continue on because there wasn't like a vet saying, hey, you should probably send Henry home. And you're like, nah, I know Henry, he's going to be fine. And then he passes away. Well, then there may be a situation where that could be culpable to you or to whatever mushers in that situation. But then now you're putting that on the vet, and there's different vets with different experiences at different locations who have seen the dog different amounts of times before they rest or after they ate or when they woke up. So I get where Iditarod's coming from in the fact that, look, we just can't, I get it, but I think a lot of mushers feel like, hey, this was clearly a sudden cardiac event. It would be nice to let the team continue on. Henry would have appreciated it, I think, and yeah, I mean, it's one of those subjects that's difficult to find a solution for, really. Yeah. And it seems like you just did everything right. It seemed like Isaac and Hunter did everything right. You were literally running like one of the most chill schedules for your team, considering how well trained they were and conditioned. And so it's just, it didn't make any sense all over the place, man. So I'm really sorry you had to go through that. And because it seemed like you were having really fast run times, 9 mile an hour, 8 mile an hour run speeds and just cruising.
Yeah, man. And I appreciate you saying all those things. And it does bring me a lot of comfort that he died doing what he loved. I think that's what he deserved. And, that was the best way for it to happen. As shitty as it was and as shitty of a circumstance as it was. But in reality, it's nobody's fault. It's not the vet's fault. It's not the Iditarod's fault. I don't think it's my fault. I can't think of a single thing that I could have done differently to prevent that from happening. It's just a simple reality of life, that life doesn't last forever.
Right. Statistically, people have heart attacks. Dogs have heart attacks. It's going to happen at one out of 5,000 times. It will happen. But yeah, so it's cool that you're getting back on the train. I'm sure you still have some of that to still process. I'm sure when you're out there running dogs, you're thinking about Henry still. It's not like, oh, okay, new season, it's still, I'm sure it's still on your mind, and you get to kind of have that motivation, I think, this year during training. And it seems like you and It looks like is Sadie's helping out, maybe training dogs too. Your girlfriend right now?
Yes. Yeah. Sadie's down at the kennel here, and she's actually training the team that I'm going to take on Iditarod. So the dogs that she's training, she ran them as yearlings last year. So she's taught them everything they know. And she's going to take them and go run the Sioux Dog in January, and the Sioux Dog 300. And that'll be her last qualifier. And then once she's done with her race, then I'm going to sort of take the reins and I'll take over and spend some time with them and get to take them out on Iditarod. So I'm really fortunate to have her help and support through all this. And honestly, super stoked to run these dogs because they're an incredible team. I'm really excited to see what they can do.
Is it the same team, or you got a new kind of a different group of dogs?
They're all 2-year-olds, so none of them have ever raced before. It's all new dogs. Yeah.
That's exciting. That's nothing like taking a bunch of rookies out on any event or training run or anything. It's just like they're just like looking at you like, I don't know what we're getting into, coach, but I'm excited about it,
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. And then they're so, enthusiastic and excited about everything, which is super cool because it just makes it even more fun.
Right on.
Sure. Well, we're probably pushing close to about an hour now. We've been having some good conversation. I feel like we can keep going. But I feel like we should probably move into wrapping it up. So we kind of like started asking some like softer hitting questions, kind of quick hitting questions. You kind of talked about your music and podcast earlier. So I'll start, and then Sean, you got to go after this.
Yeah.
Let's start with just this one's an easy one. Who is on your Mount Rushmore mushing top 5?
Top 5. Man, Lance Mackey's definitely up there. For sure. He's a legend. I would definitely put Jim Lanier up there just because he's the first guy that ever showed me how to mush. He's a big mentor of mine. Dallas Seavey, got to mush with him a little bit this year, and man, dude is a freaking animal. There's nobody like him in mushing. He is so in tune with his dogs and what's going on out there. He absolutely belongs on that list. And then I'd have to say Christian Turner too. He'd be my number 4. Another huge mentor of mine, and just has a really great attitude about mushing as a sport in general and in life in general. And then number 5, I think has to go to Mitch. The man, the myth, the legend, Mitch Seavey.
Nice, yeah, nice. What is your one of your favorite places on the globe that isn't Alaska? In Alaska?
Ooh, that's pretty tough. I'd have to say Peru, specifically Juarez. It's a town that I've spent some time in the Cordillera Blanca range. There's some really cool mountains and even cooler people down there. They're just so happy, even though they live in pretty much a third world country, and they don't have any of the luxuries or amenities that we take advantage of in Western civilization. But they're just the happiest people that you'll ever meet.
¿Hablas español?
No.
That's pretty good.
Poquito.
Put on an accent on no. Is that what you just did? No.
No, my Spanish is pretty limited.
That's funny. Have you been there more than once?
Been there a couple times. Yeah, I went there with my dad. It's like 5 or 6 years ago, and then I went back a few years ago on a climbing trip.
Nice. All right. Childhood crush.
Ooh, childhood crush. Man, I don't know if I've ever even told anybody about this one, but the first crush I can remember having, I want to say I was in 2nd grade. And I was actually homeschooled at the time, but it was sort of a different kind of a homeschool experience where we'd meet at this church and there'd be a bunch of other kids there. And one of the things we would do is we had like a swing dance. Like there's all sorts of different dances that we do every week as part of the school program. And there was this girl, Felicity, that she asked the instructor for me to be her dancing partner at like the end of the year celebration. And yeah, that has to be Felicity. So if she's listening, then you were my a childhood crush.
That's great.
That was good.
What is, let's see, one of your favorite sports teams, if you're interested in sports at all, or athletes?
Athletes. Okay, I'm not a huge sports fan. If you call like football and baseball a sport, which we could go into that. But as far as like athletes go, Marc-Andre Leclerc and David Lama are both heroes of mine. So,
what's that documentary for Marc-Andre Leclerc was? I think about that like regularly.
Oh man, I could watch that movie forever.
That's just a tough. Gosh, yeah.
All right, I got last one. Unless you got something.
Nah, I'm running out.
Yeah, last one is who is someone you want to see on the podcast, but you have to help us get them on the podcast.
I think you should interview Sadie Lindquist.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll get her on here.
You think you probably can make that happen?
I think I probably could talk her into
pull some strings or something like that.
No promises, but I might have a little bit of influence. So
nice. Well, before we officially wrap things up, if people are wanting to follow you or support you, can you just kind of tell the people how they can do that?
Yeah, the best way would be on my website. That's called calvinanddogs.com. And dogs is spelled with 2 G's.
Like Calvin and Hobbes.
Yep, but it's Calvin and Dogs.
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day when we agreed to do this. I was like, it was like right before I hit you up. I was like, oh, Calvin and Dogs. Oh, I was like, I finally got it. I was like, oh, okay, it's Calvin and Hobbes. And then
finally clicked.
Because before it clicked, I was thinking, oh, he could be like his team, like shirts could be like Calvin and the Chipmunks. But I was like, nah, it doesn't sound as sick. And so like Calvin and Dogs is probably better. They're not chipmunks, So yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, speaking of shirts, my talented sister designed a bunch of merch. So if you want to buy some super cool merch, there's
help
merch
support
available.
The team.
Help support the team. All the proceeds go to my Iditarod team. So you can find me at calvinanddogs.com.
Right on. Heck yeah. Well, thanks, dude. That was a awesome hour. It literally flew by. So thanks for coming on, man.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, guys.
Mushing, Alaska. And we also talk about other places besides Alaska, but mostly it's Alaska themed.